out of the 5 Power 5 conference championship games are set. Florida State was dealt a horrific blow to their chance of winning their first national championship in a decade. And yeah, we got to take a look at the top 25 as we get ahead of the college football playoff rankings for rivalry week. Let's go. It's the #1 college football show. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Thank you for watching on the Fox Sports app, YouTube, or listening wherever you get your podcast. Today on the show, we got to talk about the 4 out of 5 Power 5 conference championship games that are set and the one that has some scenarios to go through this weekend before we find out who is going to rep in the Big 12. We got to catch you up a bit on some games that were played late last night after we did our recap show on Saturday, and get you set for the game, Ohio State at Michigan, with the Big Ten East Championship on the line, and frankly, the fate of the Big Ten on the line, in as far as who's going to represent that Big Ten conference game against Iowa and perhaps beat Iowa and perhaps maybe even end up a #1 seed in the college football playoff. But before we get to that, let's start with number 5 Washington holding on to beat number 11 Oregon State on the road, 22-20. Washington heads to the Pac-12 championship with that win against Oregon State, and it was hard fought in the rain, murky, muddy weather, bad passing weather, and yet and still we got to see Washington's offense come up with the goods right when they needed to, and quiet as it kept, that real good Washington defense showed up. We haven't always seen real good Washington. We've seen so-so Washington most of the way. But every now and again, they can pitch a gem like this. For instance, they did that against Arizona State, and we didn't talk about that because we were talking about, well, what was Michael Penix Jr. and Rome Odunze doing or not doing? But I think this is a really great win for Washington, precisely because Michael Penix Jr. did not play very well. 162 yards passing, and really didn't complete that many passes. 7 of them, though, were to Rome Odunze, who had over 100 yards receiving. I believe if Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 1 and ought to be a unanimous All-American, wide receiver 2 is Rome Odunze. I don't know about unanimous All-American because Troy Franklin's out there doing some things, but you can see how important he has been to their success. When they were in gotta-have-it situations, they basically dialed up ISO, man-to-man. Let's see if you can hold off Rome and see if Mike can find him, give him a shot. And that was enough to get that win against Oregon State. They also have really acquitted themselves well in what I think is one of the toughest schedules in the sport this year. We're talking about a Washington team that ran through Arizona and Oregon, right, who are top 25 programs, and then a back-to-back-to-back gauntlet run that I don't think many other teams, I don't think there are 4 other teams that could run that gauntlet the way they did. In first, you go and you get USC at the Coliseum. Then you invite Utah to the house. You get them. And then you go to Oregon State, where they had been 5-0 in Corvallis, and you hand them an L. That's outstanding stuff. Like, if they beat Washington State in the Apple Cup this weekend, they're the regular season conference champ, but we don't have regular season conference champs. We have conference championships, right? I've heard the point that, hey, the conference championship game is about money. Hey, dog, this is college football. It's all about money. Stay woke. Number 2, I think that Washington would like the opportunity to go beat, say, Arizona, if they could get there, or Oregon, if they could get there. Oregon State would need to beat Oregon for Arizona to have a shot there. But you get my point here. You want to show folks that you can beat this team in Oregon that many think is better than you. And I would agree with most that Oregon probably should have won that game in Seattle if Dan Lanning isn't absolutely going YOLO and going for it on 4th down when he probably shouldn't. But scoreboard needs to matter here. And that's what I think is the point. And for those that think that Oregon is a better team than Washington, I would do what Washington is doing right now. Scoreboard. Scoreboard. Okay? One of us has a 0 in the loss column. One of us has a 1 in the loss column that we gave them. And until that is different, stay on the horse. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm from Oklahoma. We do rodeo here as a collegiate sport. And I'm telling you, Washington, stay on the horse. Stay on the bull, all right? Everybody's saying you're not that good, but as long as you stay on the bull, you can tell them to shove their bull. You know what I'm saying? I also think that this is very, very cut and dry for them. You beat Wazoo, you beat Oregon, and you are getting into the college football playoff. That is at least the attitude that I would take, because every undefeated Power 5 champion has gotten into the playoff. But that is also because, right, we don't have that many undefeated Power 5 champs. As a matter of fact, we're not going to have 5, right? We're going to have 4. And if all 4 are undefeated, I think that's your final 4. Washington has that very squarely within their sights. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention, in this gauntlet run, we got to see Washington get stretched and what they look like in pressure situations. And for the second consecutive week, they were held scoreless in the second half. You can't do that against Oregon or even Arizona, for that matter. You're going to have to find ways to go get points in the second half, because you keep that trend up. Oregon is absolutely efficient enough to take you apart and good enough defensively to give you problems. Now, it's great that you have a developing run game. Like, with the weather being what it was, Ryan Grubb in that offense was forced to give Dylan Johnson the ball 16 times, and he acquitted himself well with 89 rush yards, again, against a really good Oregon State defense. That's as Big Ten as the Pac-12 has ever been, with that Oregon State offensive defense, the way they were able to play. And I think that defense is capable of beating Oregon a second time. But will that defense show up in a Pac-12 championship game? We'll have to wait and see. That is a great way to get into my top 25 and the Associated Press top 25. And for the first time, I believe, all year, we're identical 1 through 9. Like, I don't normally agree with what they're doing. And yet, here's where we are. Like, I was really having this discussion about, did Georgia show me enough in their win, just ridiculous win against Tennessee, 38-10, to take over that 1 spot? And did Michigan show me fragility? And what did Ohio State show me? What did Washington show me? So I'm getting into this. I'm going, okay, Georgia was dominant against a top 25 opponent. I don't think Tennessee is very good. Ask Florida about that, right? And we'll get to Missouri here in a second. But you're being dominant against teams that I want you to be dominant against. You also have 4 ranked victories, okay? Michigan doesn't have that many. But the thing that I had Michigan at number 1 for was being dominant. They were not dominant against Penn State, even though it looked like they were in control. And they were not dominant against Maryland. And Maryland is not Penn State. And if Maryland doesn't make mistakes, I think we're talking about them having a real shot to beat Michigan, which is not untrue from last year. That was a 1-score game last year in Ann Arbor. And then Ohio State finally began to look like the Ohio State that we know. That's the one with an offense to pair with an outstanding defense. I remember going into the season and asking Ryan Day about Jim Knowles in year 2, and he says, we think we can be as good as we were in 2019 defensively, which raised an eyebrow for me. But check this out. The Ohio State defense has not allowed an explosive play of 40 yards or more all year. Nobody has scored more than 17 points on that Ohio State defense in any one outing. They tackle in front of themselves. They turn you over. They get important stops. For the first time in 4 years, it is the Ohio State defense and not just Ohio State's defense, right? And in the second half against Minnesota particularly, I got to see that offense finally function like I expect a Ryan Day offense to function, from Travion Henderson to Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka doing some work in the first half, Kyle McCord looking good enough to beat Michigan, which is what we're talking about, right? So if you get second half Ohio State against Michigan in Ann Arbor on Saturday, I think that is the team that is capable of knocking off the 2-time defending Big Ten champions. Just outstanding play from that offense and in what needed to be an efficient performance against a Minnesota team that isn't very good. Michigan fans be the first to tell you, hey, we put 50 up on Minnesota and they scored just 10. You're talking about them putting up 37 and allowing just 3. I'm going, well, Ohio State has also allowed just 6 points to its last 2 opponents. I don't care that they're Minnesota and Michigan State. Keeping people from scoring TDs is a very big deal at the Power 5 level. And then when you're able to score like they've been able to score, right? Split the difference of 75 points. Yeah, 37 and 38, that's good enough. And I think you get into the 30s against Michigan, that's a game you can win. And I also think that they have the better opportunities to be explosive. Like in short yardage situations, I want Blake Corum. If I got to have a big play, I need Travion Henderson in the backfield. And since Mayan Williams has gone down, Travion Henderson has played outstanding football. It's almost like that dude doesn't like to share. It's almost like that dude's like, get me as many touches as you can, and I will go put up these yards. He had 146 on the ground against Minnesota. He's had a couple of 200-yard from scrimmage performances, and with him as the bell cow, they look like they know what they are doing, and you're getting man-on-man for 1-8 when you can, and forcing people to come down to the box, right? And you can do that. Marvin Harrison Jr. can go to work for you. So can Cade Stover. So can Emeka Egbuka. I think Ohio State's in a position to really give Michigan a great battle on Saturday, but Michigan's still the third best team in all of college football to me. No Jim Harbaugh being there doesn't seem to matter. They know what they're going to do and they know how they want to do it. And they get later into November, we're talking about a team that is going to run behind its two-time Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Like, they got 7 guys on that offensive line. They have a package where they put all 7 of those dudes on the line. They line up the deuce in the backfield and they say, go get us 6. And that guy is probably going to break his teammate Hassan Haskins' record, former teammate, for rushing TDs in a season. He's already got the rushing TD record for a career with 51 and counting. And he scored a rushing TD in 11 straight games, basically going back to the one for which he blew out his knee against Ohio State. So if you get on schedule, you can do what you want to do. But with J.J. McCarthy seeming to regress, frankly, the last couple of weeks, I have some reservations about how they're going to be able to move the ball down the field when they get in a third and long situations. And are you going to be able to trust Rome Wilson to go out there and win a one-on-one against a guy like Jordan Hancock or Denzel Burke? Are you going to be able to trust Colston Loveland to take on one of those safeties like a Josh Proctor and go get you a really difficult first down? I expect this game to be back and forth. I expect this game to be really fun. But I have never done a live tailgate event where Ohio State has won the game. Every live tailgate event that I have done, Michigan has won the game. And we're talking about years in a row with Ohio State not losing that game. And I'm just saying, Michigan, I'm your lucky charm. Maybe you just need to have me on the mic as you try to go do your thing. But even so, right, I think that there is a path for the loser of the game to get into the college football playoff, which leads me back to Washington, Florida State, and really Oregon. Those 3 right there. Washington, as I mentioned, take care of business. Florida State, I think, is the same thing. We got some devastating news for Florida State in their game, their senior night game against North Alabama. Jordan Travis went down with a season-ending leg injury. It sucks. It absolutely is the worst news, not just for Florida State, but for college football fans, right? I have derided Florida State for its schedule, and I stick to that. However, run through this undefeated. You beat Louisville in the ACC title game. You're going to get into the college football playoff, Tate Roadmaker or not, right? I believe that the college football playoff should do for Florida State what it did for Texas. You'll remember Quinn Ewers goes down with the shoulder injury. The next week, the college football playoff comes out with its rankings. They still have Texas at 7 ahead of Alabama. Now, do we think that Malik Murphy goes into Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama? Probably not. Do we think that Quinn Ewers makes them the number 7 team in the country? Probably yes. And yet, we got to see them hold still with Quinn Ewers not playing. Florida State is within its rights and expectations to expect not to move any further down than 5 because their quarterback suffered a season-ending injury. And I'm really going to watch this closely because they're already proven to be hypocritical on that committee, docking Ohio State for nothing really. If you're going to rank them at 1, what have they done to not be ranked 1? You're going, well, Georgia's been more dominant. Well, they've been dominant all year. They had more ranked wins than Ohio State going into that. We're looking at resumes here. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but that's not what you're doing here. You are making up a rubric that you can't even stick to. And that's the first rule of making these top 25s, guys. You have to establish for the audience and for yourself, what is the criteria? And you have to stick to that, right? If you win head-to-heads, that ought to matter. If you play more opponents that have numbers next to their names than someone else who's got the same amount of wins, that needs to matter too. I've had Washington in this 4 spot the whole time. I'm glad to see the AP voters finally have caught up to this. Maybe it was just watching the primetime game and seeing how that Washington team stood up against what we all know was a good Oregon State team. I also am looking at this going, if you're Florida State, okay, what did we do wrong? We went and won a game that we were supposed to win because the starting quarterback was out? No, look, I think we're going to settle this in conference championship weekend, frankly. And if both of those teams win, they ought to get in. And I don't think that the loser of the game should get in, but we've seen what this committee will do. This committee will put both Ohio State and Michigan into the college football playoff if they think that the loser of that game is still one of the 4 best teams in the sport. I don't like it. I don't think it's fair, but, this is the sport, right? One of the things that Producer Cat really helped me understand when I got into this job is you can't talk about it like you want it to be. You have to talk about it the way that it is, right? And the way that it is, Ohio State and Michigan run a lot of this sport. And if they play each other close, might be that the Florida State ACC champ needs to blow out Louisville to get that thing. And if Louisville wins that game, they'll go, what did we do wrong? How aren't we into this thing? So forth and so on. So I think that if you are very honest about your criteria and you stick to it and you're the committee, yeah, okay, you provide yourself a level of cover. But if you're doing what you're doing now, like moving Missouri into the top 10, basically because they beat up on Tennessee, a Tennessee that Georgia, frankly, didn't beat up as badly, okay, then what are we doing here? It's almost as if they care more about the SEC than they do any other conference. And they care about Ohio State and Michigan the way they care about Georgia and Alabama, not to say they care about the Big Ten the way they care about the SEC. It's nice to see Toledo getting in here. They're 10-1 with an opportunity to win the MAC championships against 9-2 Miami of Ohio. It's a good football team over there. Jason Candle's probably going to get some looks for another head coaching job. I like seeing Tulane staying put for 18 for me, 18 for them. I think they're in a spot right now where they could get into the Group of 5 bowl, but like the New Year's Six bowl were the Group of 5 team. And quiet as it is kept, UNLV has been playing outstanding football in the Mountain West. Shout out to former classmate at the University of Tulsa and great wide receiver Brendan Marion, whose go-go offense is absolutely putting in and doing work out there in Vegas. I'm really fascinated to find out why Tennessee gets to stay in the top 25. I don't understand. I don't get it. I would love for an AP voter to explain to me why Tennessee is one of the 25 best teams in the sport when they just got beat down 2 times by Missouri and Georgia at back-to-back weeks and dropped the game to a Florida team that ain't no good, okay? To speak of Missouri not being no good, the backup quarterback Florida nearly handed you your head. And if we're talking about a Florida secondary that cared to cover Luther Burden, maybe Florida goes against that upset. But as it stood, I got to applaud Eli Drinkwitz. He said, hey, who's the best player we got on the team? Is it Luther Burden? Cool. Let's throw it up to him and see what happens. And you know what? It worked for them. So I'm for that. I like it when people go with the smart play, and that works out for them. On the other hand, if you're Florida, you got to go, hey, how do we leave this dude buck naked open? And then how do we let them get into position for somebody who deigns to go by the thicker kicker to gator chomp on us? Look, man, the gator chomp's getting out of control. You used to just didn't do that because Florida used to take that so personally and would let you know the next year. Now you got the Missouri kicker chomping on you. You got the Missouri kicker chomping on you so bad that you got folks in Arkansas beside themselves about Sam Pittman and Aggieville, not Aggieville, but College Station. Aggieville's in Manhattan. And College Station going, how are we behind Missouri? This can't stand, bro. This will not stand, bro. Like real dude vibes over here. But I'm really interested to see how this goes the rest of the way because there's some Big 12 teams in here that we got to talk about. And that's really the most fascinating part of this weekend, honestly. Outside of Ohio State and Michigan, which is the game and the one that everybody's going to watch, that game might actually pull 15 million viewers. I understand some of y'all don't care, but I absolutely care how many people watch a college football game because it tells me who people think is interesting, right? And important. But looking at this Big 12, let's say scenarios, it's very simple if you're Texas, right? At number 7. Get into the Big 12 championship game. Hope that Oklahoma gets there so you can avenge the one loss that you took this season and maybe give the committee something to think about, or put yourself sitting pretty if Florida State blows it against Louisville, or maybe even if Washington blows it against Oregon, though Oregon probably might sort of get into your spot because they're 6. You know what I'm saying? You got to hope that Georgia dispatches Alabama because I don't think that an Alabama team that beats Georgia for the SEC title not getting in the college football playoff. another conference that could absolutely get two teams into the playoff once again. Oklahoma State 6-2, Oklahoma 6-2, Kansas State 6-2. That's where I cut off, right? Because I think those are the four teams that could play in the Big 12 championship in the most likely scenarios. And we're going to get to find out real quick if Oklahoma's got a shot, because they got Texas Christian at home on Friday, and then Texas Tech is at Texas at home, at Texas on Friday too. So we'll get some answers there before Saturday about what needs to happen on Saturday to fill out the field. But let's start with the scenario so that everybody's on the same page as we go into this weekend. So Texas is first in the Big 12 with a win this weekend, full stop. They're first with a loss, though, from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, right? They're first with a loss for Oklahoma. If they win, Oklahoma State wins, Kansas State wins, right? So basically, the only way they finish second is if they lose to Texas Tech and Oklahoma State loses their game against BYU. BYU all of a sudden looking plucky, by the way. Kansas State would finish second with a win. Oklahoma State loss and an Oklahoma loss. So they need both the Oklahoma teams to lose and they need to win. They'd also finish second with an Oklahoma win, an Oklahoma State win, and a Texas loss. Right? So Kansas State absolutely has something to play for against Iowa State on Saturday. That game is in Manhattan. Oklahoma State would finish first in the Big 12 conference with a win, a Texas loss, and an Oklahoma loss. So they need the OU Texas teams to lose, and they need to win to finish first, right? They'd also finish first with Oklahoma winning and Texas losing and Kansas State losing, right? They finished second, though, with a win and a Texas win. They finished second with a loss, a Texas win, and an Oklahoma loss, and they finished second with a loss, an Oklahoma loss, and a Kansas State loss. A lot of moving and shaking in there, but basically Oklahoma State and Texas win your football games, and things are probably going to go your way. And as far as getting into the Big 12 championship game. And then finally, my Oklahoma Sooners, they need to win first and foremost against Texas Christian. They get to 10 wins. That'd be great, especially after last year going 6-7. Remarkable turnaround for Brent Venables. No matter what you think of how the team has played this year, that's been phenomenal. I've been very pleased with that. So they finished first in the Big 12 with a win and a Texas loss and Oklahoma State loss. I don't think that that's likely, but it's on the table for them. They could finish second with a win and a Texas win and an Oklahoma State loss, right? And they finished second with a win, a Texas loss, an Oklahoma State win, and a Kansas State loss. So their best bet is to hope that perhaps BYU gets on its horse and does for Oklahoma what Utah did for Ryan Day and Ohio State last year to get them into the playoff. You're going to need some help here, right? The only person that gets to say what goes on is Texas. Everybody else is going to need some help to get into this thing, but those are four teams that all deserve, frankly, to play in the Big 12 championship game and should make one really thrilling. But if you're Texas, you got to be rooting for Oklahoma this weekend because they are the team for which you are being compared to, and they are the team that I think gives you the best opportunity to present a really great win to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. And in that way, you get to make the college football playoff the way that Oklahoma did in 2018. You'll remember Kyler Murray not only won the Heisman over Texas' dead body in the Big 12 championship game, but got into the college football playoff because of that win and that weekend. That was really outstanding. I know that Texas would love nothing more than to be able to return that favor at AT&T Stadium in Dallas on December 2nd. Going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be watching all of those games going into this weekend. We'll talk about them on Saturday after the live tailgate event, for which I will be in Los Angeles in studio to recap the day and get you set up for conference championship Saturday rankings and what needs to happen in those games. Finally, let's go out with a segment that we really haven't been able to do a whole lot this season. But hey, November gives us. It's awesome when it happens because check it. We're going to do some money in the bag. Look. It's not just that New Mexico State whooped Auburn 31-10 at Jordan Air in Auburn, Alabama. It's that the Tigers paid $1.85 million for the privilege. Auburn, I said you've been had. I said you've been took. I said you've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, run astray, run amok. This is what he does. New Mexico State Put the shimmy in the shag. War, damn, eagle. Put the money in the bag. Man, now we got to talk about Liberty, perhaps going undefeated with a win against New Mexico State, and then winning a bowl game and absolutely hanging the banner in Lynchburg, Virginia. This is what you did, New Mexico State, or this is what you did, Auburn. And shout out to Brian Harsin, who was a lot of things, but never lost to New Mexico State at home. All right, I want to go out wishing my absolute love of my life, my partner, Laurel Williamson, a happy birthday. She's spending it watching Twilight with the girls. Very excited to get a part of that. I love you so much, baby. All right, our number one college football leads of screening are Jack Coakley and Torrin Westfall. They make us better in the film room. Production assistant Kiara Santana and Kyla Morris. Put the special in our special team. Social producer Javion Duncan. Make sure the recruits and the rivals see the cake we baked. Chris Cheshire making an appearance, sending in the signal. Senior producer Catherine Cordaji sees the entire field from the booth. Lead producer Tyler Wojak calls the plays from the sideline, and the play snaps on my clap. We will be back live to talk about the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's top 25 rankings on Tuesday night. Until then, stay low, keep those feet driving. Deuces.